Yeah, thank you. Yeah, support the poor guy. Please welcome Tim Jensen. Tim, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me good? Yep. All right, thank you. All right, so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about mining NFS shares and the new age of NFS mining. Before that, the obligatory business speech. I work for BSI. We do compliance and pen testing in the world, so if you're looking for any of those, especially ISO testing or pen testing, give us a call. Speech over. All right, so in case you have no idea what NFS is, I'm going to discuss that very briefly. So NFS is network file shares, used mostly with Linux. It's kind of considered legacy nowadays. And there's version 3 and version 4 out there. Use different ports, 2048 or 2049. It's very popular with backup systems, which is largely what I made this tool for. Is it's becoming increasingly popular with backup systems to have NFS ports out there. And there's no authentication on the protocol. You basically use IP filtering to lock it down for the most part. What about that whole hearing me okay, if you guys weren't hearing me okay? All right, does that sound a little better? All right, I will just hug this mic. All right, so there's no encryption in version 3. Version 4 does have encryption, but it's not on by default. So just in case you've never heard of NFS, it would have been very confusing to watch my talk if you had no idea. So that is the very brief NFS talk. So basically what happened, the problem was in February, I had a network that had 85 NFS shares on it. NFS is like a Windows file share basically, but for Linux. And instead of calling it a file share, they call it an export for no good reason. And each of these, 85 NFS shares had 5 export shares on it, which comes out to being a lot of things to dig through. So I was looking for different tools that had existed in the past, and Nmap had an export documentation, so you could run it and it would show the exports. Nessus could show what exports are out there, but no data in them. And there was a tool called NFSpy, which I used to use a lot in the past. And it only works for version 3, and even version 3 broke. Version 4 is not supported, and most people have moved to version 4. So I found there is no tools out there for digging through and enumerating NFS, which was kind of sad for me, especially because I really needed this done on a time frame. So, kind of what I just talked about, but the problem is, how can we list exports for a host that's fast? Doing it is time consuming if you're doing it manually. Listing each of the files on every export is very time consuming. So that 85 hosts with 5 exports each was 425 different file shares I had to dig through. On a 1-week engagement, when that is just one tiny sliver of the whole engagement, that is not doable, right, manually? So, and then I wanted to search for some sensitive files on there as well. So how do you do all of this on an engagement in a short period of time? So my solution, which was way too late because, I started this solution in July and the test was over in February. So my solution was a tool called NFS Miner that I created. And I can take a single host or a text file of hosts, and it enumerates all of the exports on each host. It mounts each export. It captures all the different file directory for 3 layers deep. It scans for some known sensitive files like etc password, etc shadow, that kind of thing. And then I can do an optional recursive grep that I'll discuss a bit later. That's a bad idea, but you can do it, and I'll explain why it's a bad idea. And then it unmounts the share for you, or the export, because that's useful. So, kind of going over what I wrote. So, NFS Miner is available out on GitHub, and it has a help file. I didn't know how well the help file would show up if I showed you the command line mode, so I gave you in white text as well. But basically, yeah, right, because I was having that problem earlier this week, or earlier this con. So you can put in the different hosts, you can set timings on them, and you can disable or enable certain checks. The reason for the grep, why I say it's a bad idea, grepping a remotely attached file system is incredibly slow. So if it's just a couple of directories, that's fine, and dig through. If it turns out to be whole systems, /user is a nightmare when you're grepping through. And if you're doing that across 85 hosts and 425 exports, that turns very poor. Since these are backup systems, usually, that I'm testing, you will have whole systems, so one export could have 300 computer systems on it, and completely mirrored for the backup. So grepping that is incredibly slow. On the other hand, if you have the time to run it, it does find some fun things. So that's the help file if you couldn't read it, or if you wanted to read it in black and white. So when you run the tool, you can just give it like here. I have a host up there. Hopefully you guys can read this because it does seem darker now. But you can see that it found some possible loop files. So /var/www is that first group there, and it found 4 interesting files. So some idiot in the var www that I created had their SSH key, it's like their password file, password back, site.ini, that kind of thing. So it just searches for some things. That the interesting files is just a file with the tool. So when you actually look at the directory, there's a file list.txt, so you can just add whatever interesting files you want to look for, and the tool picks it up for you. It creates some output directories, so every test is put, or every time that you run it, it's put into its own special directory by default, so you don't have to type out a new directory. And it saves every export verbose information, as well as an overall, basically this output here is saved as well. So, and here's just an example of the output for each export. And then, since I'm a lazy pen tester, it also adds exactly what I need to copy and paste into my reports, and hopefully for you too if you're a pen tester. So you can put in the IP, the port, and just copy and paste this into a Word table, and it automatically puts it into different columns for you. Kind of the future roadmap of what I'm going down for it is being able to automatically import Nmap and XML, Nessus XML results. Doing automatic user permission bypassing, which I'll chat about just briefly. So NFSpy, and the reason why it was so great was if you have a whole computer system and you're connected on Kali, so you're root. When you're connected to their computer system, you can't read every file, but one of them will say like a user ID is 10096, and if you create on your local system 10096, you SU to that user, and go back to that directory of those files that you've mounted, you can read those files now as that user. So you can bypass most user authentication if they haven't configured NFS properly. You can bypass all that. And NFSpy used to do that automatically, so I'm going to build the same thing in and do the sensitive file checks and statting all those subdirectories with any user account. So hopefully it will be helpful. Saves a lot of manual time again digging through. Yeah. That would be root. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, it will. Any user on there, unless they're setting permissions properly on the share to squash permissions. Unless they do that, you can read any file on the system by just changing whatever user. And you wouldn't actually need to care about root because on Kali you're root already, so it'll just see your user 0. But weirdly enough, user 0 can't read user 10056 or whatever other user. If they're set to only being able to read that file. So if permissions are set to read only user, you have to change to that user, even though you've created the user on your own system. So, all right. Next thing I'm going to change is to add ports manually, because right now I hard-coded it because it was fast, and I haven't actually seen anybody running NFS on random ports, but if the tool ever gets popular, they will. And doing your own grep queries, because I have it just searching for certain things like password equals, but again, it's slow as molasses, so I'm a little worried about people doing a very overloaded grep. And wanted to automatically copy the flagged interesting files, or have a flag to change that so it can pull those down automatically. Because I can leave all the shares open, I have a flag for that, so you can not unmount everything. But if you're scanning like 1,000 NFS shares on the internet or something, you probably don't want 1,000 active connections on your box, or you're going to have a problem. So it'd be nice to copy the data down and then close the share back out. And then, because I'm trying to do this fast so you guys can get home, so the finale is NFS Miner. I opened it up earlier today, so everybody can go and grab it if you want. It is very much in alpha stage, so bugs are aplenty. The upside is, currently, I'm only mounting in read-only, so you can't mess up the shares that you're connecting to. Knock on wood, hopefully. But, so go out, play with it, send me all the bugs that you find. I built this for a specific use case. I had about 3 customers back-to-back that had NFS, and I haven't seen any since, which early in 2020 I will again. I'm sure, but currently I don't have any. So anybody that has some NFS on your network, run it. Tell me what breaks, tell me how it goes, and tell me if it's useful. And then email any questions to my work email there, tim.jensen@bsigroup.com, or reach out to me on Twitter if you. So I'm just EAPOL Sniper on Twitter, just like my GitHub. So, and that is the very fast presentation on NFS Miner. Any
That's
questions?
awesome. Questions?